It's a great privilege for me to be actually um, sitting beside these eminent dignitaries with such years of expertise in their own fields of research. And without further ado, I would first like to actually invite Professor Dr. Prabal Roy Chaudhary to speak. He will be talking about his, he will be sharing his insights on Navadvip. If you would go ahead itself.
Shador Namaskar to all of you. So I come here to refresh your memory on a very important site of South Bengal, Navadvip, the erstwhile citadel, one of the citadel's cultural capitals of Bengal, and its legacy as a preeminent seat of Indic scholarship. In the process of doing so, I will strive to make very brief forays, since we are acutely short of time, to look at the history, extent, pedagogy, and textual and scholastic traditions of the university that flourished in this town for perhaps over a millennium. Navadvip is a small town to the north of Kolkata, we all know, in the Nadia district, and is famous for its association with the great Vaishnava savant and leader of the Bhakti movement, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And it is also the capital of the imperial Sena kingdom up until the early 13th century. The town continued to function as a preeminent center for classical and Sanskritic learning well into the 19th century. So I am tempted to add one small bit of information here. We all know Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was a scholar of Nyaya, but I would personally take Chaitanya Mahaprabhu more to be a political philosopher than an academic philosopher. I think Anilji would agree with me. For long before this, however, the educational enterprise that came to flourish at Navadvip had possessed of a richer background. As far as back as the 8th and 9th centuries, when the Pala imperial dynasty was in power, several educational institutions had begun to flourish in the Rar Banga region. Some scholarly investigations indicate to us that it was perhaps around that time a Buddhist monastery was founded in a place called Suvarna Vihara, which is close to Navadvip. Subsequently, with Buddhism losing steam, losing state patronage, and monasteries falling into neglect, the existing tradition of the study of philosophy and logic was taken over by the local scholars, who then moved on to study Nyaya and Smriti. Hence, it may be argued that Navadvip's development into a major center for scholarly studies probably began during this time, before its gradual transformation over the next few centuries into a permanent hub for knowledge, uh, transformation, intellectual inquiry, scholarly investigation, knowledge acquisition, and its dissemination. The destruction of the famous universities at Nalanda, Vikramshila, and Odantapuri at the beginning of the 13th century contributed to the elevation to preeminence of seats of higher learning in Mithila and Navadvipa. Though Navadvipa was also sacked at about the same time for being the seat of the imperial Senas, it appears that the educational activities extant there perhaps did not suffer from the kind of death blow that had been inflicted at Nalanda and elsewhere. For some time, Navadvipa competed with Mithila in being a site of advanced knowledge production, but it came to surpass the later, earning fame for being the seat of emerging Navyanaya branch of Indian philosophy, which had developed primarily through the seminal works of Gangesh Upadhyay in the 13th century. It is now well established that by the early 15th century, Narahari Visharad pioneered the establishment of a Chatushpati in Navadvip. Here he initiated the practice of a systemic study of Nyaya, Smriti, and Vedanta. Slowly, Jyotisha and other disciplines also entered into the academic corpus when renowned scholars like Nilambar Chakravarti, he was Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's maternal grandfather, migrated from Srihattari, which is now in Bangladesh, to join the center at Navadvipa. So, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's father also migrated to Navadvipa, Jagannath Mishra. Now, why these migrations? These migrations will tell us that Navadvipa was a seat, as I was telling you, of preeminent scholarship, and the scholars from other regions vied to come there because it was a more famous university. Okay, Narahari Visharad's own son, Vasudeva Sarvabhauma, was perhaps the most famous scholar at Navadvipa. He not only mastered multiple disciplines, but later went to become chief advisor to the king of Odisha, Raja Purushottama Deva. After him, scholars like Raghunath Shiromani, Mathuranath Tarkavagisha, Jagadish Tarkalankar, Gadadhar Bhattacharya, Harihar Bhattacharya, Srinath Acharya Tarkachuramani. He is famous for having written a ritual liturgy to goddess Durga. Raghunandan Bhattacharya, again, needs no introduction, the great Smarta Bhattacharya. Maheshwara Gauracharya and Krishnananda Agambagisha brought great fame, name, and scholarly accomplishments to the knowledge hub at Navadvipa through their multidisciplinary approaches. After the Battle of Plassey in 1757, just before I forget, there was another great scholar whose name was Madhusudana Saraswati. He was not associated with Navadvipa per se, but there is a story about him visiting Navadvipa. It is recounted that Navadvipe samayate Madhusudana Vakpatau Chakampe Tarkavagisha Kataro Bhuta Gadadhara. So there was this, the Kulapati of Navadvipa was Gadadhar Tarkavagisha. Hearing that Madhusudan Saraswati is going to pay a visit to Navadvip, Gadadhar Tarkavagisha started trembling out of fear, respect, okay, nothing else. So after the Battle of Plassey in 1757, British became the paramount power in Bengal. They became aware of Navadvipa's existence and started referring to it as the Oxford of the East, intending thereby to obliquely highlight Oxford's antiquity and reputation. Although the people of Bengal accepted this label with a sense of false pride, such comparisons was a matter of fact devoid of merit, since Navadvipa has had a far more ancient provenance and a greater intellectual outreach. In 1787, when Sir William Jones, a member of the Supreme Court of Calcutta and the founder of the Asiatic Society, the administrator was here in the morning, visited Navadvipa, or Nadia as the British called it, he wrote to the Earl of Spencer that this is the third university of which I am a member. 4 years later, in 1791, the Calcutta Monthly Register noted, I quote, "The grandeur of the foundation of the Nadia University is generally acknowledged. It consists of 3 colleges, Nadia, Shantipur, and Gopalpara, each endowed with lands for maintaining masters in every science." So, it talks about Raja Rudra Rai, the, I think, great-grandfather of Maharaja Krishna Chandra Rai. And it also talks about 1,500 scholars and 5,000 pupils all studying gratuitously. So according to another account by William Adam, who made a survey of indigenous institutions in Bengal in about 1825 to 1835, that region. So on the order of Governor General William Bentinck, he writes, in 1829, there were reported to be 25 institutions of Sanskrit learning in Navadvipa with 500 to 600 students in all. The university that existed in Navadvipa had students coming from various regions of Bengal and as well as from different parts of the country, with all of them studying gratuitously. The tuition fees model was aligned with the core principles of indigenous Indian education. Unlike the higher educational enterprises that existed in Britain and elsewhere in Europe, the university at Navadvipa was run on decentralized lines, with the local society providing for its expenses and maintenance through traditional practices of revenue sharing and caring. This arrangement has been in practice in existence for many centuries before the British administrators appropriated the resources of our land and our people and uprooted the beautiful, flourishing tree of the indigenous Indian education system, leaving it incapacitated. The imposition of the British education model in India resulted in the loss to Indian society of its own traditional institutions, which had continued unbrokenly up to the 18th, 19th century. So it goes without saying, this is my appeal, that there exists at present a crucial need for undertaking a detailed study, into the rich history of such an higher education and enterprise of your within our country. Of particular relevance within this study will be a detailed investigation into the pedagogy and modus operandi that existed in our Dvipa for a millennium and more. So, what is to be looked at is the paraphernalia and the amanuenses that sustain the institution, the textual traditions, the intellectual output, and this will result in a production that will not be a binding testament to a strong cultural and Indic civilizational roots, but also it will contribute to the idea of a self-reflective, self-resilient India. And it will also help us to appreciate our own brilliant national heritage, help us to overcome our cultural amnesia, and help us to finitely gain the confidence to make new ideations, arrive at new insights, and build new bridges in refining our future in these crucial times. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Roy Chaudhary, for this deeply insightful talk. Now, I would like to invite Professor Amitabh Chatterjee. He would be speaking on the evolution of wrestling in India with specific emphasis on Bengal.
A very good afternoon. I am really thankful to the organizers for allowing me the platform to speak here. I research on history of sports, and so I thought that this particular topic will fit into this seminar. And my title of today's talk is From Akhada to Ring, a socio-cultural history of the evolution of wrestling in India. So it's a question of heritage of wrestling. Wrestling has been a popular sport in India from its rudimentary form of combat exercise, predominantly practiced by the warrior class as it depicted in the ancient texts and sculpture. And it has been triumphant to the test of time on becoming an indigenous sporting practice in a true proficient spirit. Now, if you look at the early genesis, you will find that while S.H. Deshpande mentioned about martial sports like Mushti Juddho and Mollo Juddho from the very later Vedic period. Now, here you will find in this particular pictures the genesis of the sports, the sculptures which reflect different postures of wrestling in ancient times. Representation of the games are very limited in these ancient artifacts, but interestingly, Bharut's sculptures illustrate two wrestlers which may be assigned to the middle of the 2nd century BC. The Jatakas also recounted about wrestling bouts which were arranged religiously in an arena surrounded by mandapams or sport pavilions from which the public appreciated the spectacle. Now, while moving on to the nature of the combat sport, the most authentic ancient Indian text dealing with the craft of physical culture, especially wrestling, was Mollo Puran. Now, you will find two very interesting pictures. One, Garuda fighting with wrestling skills, and there Krishna and Balaram, they are also fighting Kangsho. Indian mollos had given proper emphasis on massage from ancient times, and it is even prescribed by the Mollo Puran. Also known as Mardana, massage has been categorized under 4 heads, of which Bhim Sheni massage was really very important. Worship of certain pervasive deities like monkey god or Hanuman was common among the wrestlers before entering the Akhada. Hanuman is best known from Ramayana for his Herculean physical prowess or his dedication towards Lord Rama. The wrestlers prayed to Hanuman to shield them from any harm and to bestow strength and courage on them. Let me quickly go through these slides. This is the first slide on wrestling in northern India, from where the actual evolution of wrestling started. You will find one Mughal court painting of Shah Jahan where a wrestling match is being organized. Now we come to the next part of North Indian wrestling, where we find Palwan Gama. You all have heard of him, who earned quite uh, fame in the international level as wrestling became a source of national pride. According to a number of biographies of the wrestling prodigy, he acquired a huge reputation at the age of 15 when he challenged the established wrestlers of his time in the royal court of Jodhpur. Now, Gama also defeated Zebaxo, a man of Herculean strength, at least a couple of times. Now, the middle picture is Gama fighting Zebaxo. Here also, you'll find the picture of Ghulam Muinuddin, who championed the Greco-Roman style of wrestling, which was altogether a new technique for the Indians. Many outstanding wrestlers of the international frame were groomed in the indigenous Akhadas of India. Historians, however, ignored the fact that this challenge from the native Indian wrestlers created a nationalist pride. Now, this is wrestling in southern India, where you will find medieval Vijayanagar Empire wrestling match being shown in the extreme right picture, and also from the Mahabalipuram temple, the left one. Among the Telugu speaking people, the JT caste were considered as professional wrestlers and gymnasts who were mainly based in the Mysore district. Now, the JTs adopted, now you will find the picture of the JTs. They adopted both Shaivism as well as Vaishnavism and put on distinctive caste marks on their foreheads and bodies. They were noted professional wrestlers and displayed plenty of physical feats. The tradition of wrestling continued in South India through ages. Rammurthy Naidu of Vijayawada of South India was considered as Indian Hercules. Hatha Yoga gave him phenomenal strength, but it was abundantly clear from his physique and unbelievable display of might that Hatha Yoga was largely supplanted with other modes also. Here we find the picture of Rammurthy with his disciples. Interestingly, Rammurthy was known as Professor Rammurthy. Why? We don't know at all. Now, this is the picture of wrestling in Western India. Now, these are also very old pictures where you will find wrestling as a part of our own heritage is being shown. Now, here you will find plenty of akhadas or shalas of Western India, which were really very important. Now we come back to colonial Bengal. Now this is very important to come back to Bengal, and coming to the context of the patronage of wrestling in Bengal, it may be dated back to the 19th century when the elite Bengali families, in addition to patronizing popular musicians and popular folk theater performed by plebeian performers, also encouraged wrestling, which happened to be a part of visual entertainments on the splendid festive occasions like Durga Puja. Wrestling happened to be a regular exercise for the gatemen who used to guard the gates of the palatial buildings for their masters, that is, the Darwans. The patricians added a new layer to what was evidently a servant's exercise by organizing wrestling competitions in their garden houses or in the courtyards for the natives and European spectators to witness these physical combats. Within the setting of regional Bengal, culture from ancient past traditional wrestling can be contemplated much more than just a trivial sport. Northern part of the metropolis was considered as the focal point of wrestling. This apart, on special occasions, the villagers, in a mood of mirth and festivity, often played games as a means of entertaining themselves. On the auspicious day of Nobanno, wrestling competitions were regularly held. Hindu India had a great tradition of physical culture. To provide a striking example, the example of Rabindranath Tagore is very important, who was taught under strict guardianship as he cultivated the opposite arts of music as well as physical culture. And he was a very good, very well known wrestler himself. Now, here you will find in this picture various poses and forms of wrestling which were regularly practiced in Gurudev's Shantiniketan. Ombu Guho, a scion of a very wealthy family of landholders in North Calcutta, a contemporary of Tagore's, studied wrestling as flared and mastered it in the late 19th century. He went to the extent of establishing a family gymnasium in an institutionalized manner. He was glad enough to extend his patronage not only to the local enthusiasts but also to various experts of wrestling hailing from Punjab and United Provinces. Guha galvanized numerous feeble Bengalis to develop a new genre of physical culture movement in Bengal. The evolution of sporting culture as an aspect of mass culture emphasizes the emancipation of sporting culture from courtier of the nobles. The modern sporting culture drew out such physical shows of 19th century from their private domain. With the passage of time, we see the changing nature of the Akhadas once established by urban notables acquiring the features of a club in the truest sense of the term. The Akhada in the house of Ketu Guho of Dorjipara attracted wrestlers from different provinces of India. Eminent wrestlers Gobor Guho, the picture you can see, the giant Gobor Guho, who was really iconic at that point of time, and Bengal has its heritage of wrestling through this particular man. The next picture you will find the wrestling bouts in Shimla Bayam Shomiti, where even the muscular monk, that is Swami Vivekananda, used to practice regularly. On 27th August 1913, Gobor won the Scottish Championship, defeating the heavyweight combatant Jimmy Campbell. In Paris, he established Indian supremacy over European wrestlers in the Novocritic tournament. Apart from this competitive skill, he was also a successful supervisor who nurtured future wrestlers like Bonomani Ghosh, Dasharathi Ghosh, Uday Mukherjee, and plenty of them. Now, here you will find Bhim Bhavani, who was another iconic wrestler of Bengal, and he was really prolific in organizing wrestling matches in Bengal, and he was very, very, what should I say? He was an icon by himself. There is no repudiation of the fact that wrestling is perhaps the only indigenous sport in which created its own space for several centuries. It had its own heritage, it had its own culture without much intervention. Indian bout, accordingly, is considered as a bout to the finish. Wrestling, though a manly sport, was not restricted exclusively for men. It is not very true that the women in the modern era of empowerment always rub their shoulders with their male counterparts. This phenomena was nevertheless immensely evident in colonial Bengal from the last quarter of the 19th century. In a report in Bharat Borsho, it was mentioned that the male gaze became the talk of the day for women wrestling competition. The era of globalization has nonetheless permeated creative spirit in the arena of wrestling. The mattress Akhada controversy has its own take. In the local level, especially in Maharashtra and Punjab, the annual tournaments are organized in traditional mitti. In Bengal also, if you go to the villages, till date, you will find the heritage of wrestling still persists. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Chatterjee. Now I would like to invite Mr. Shudra Shekhar Roy. to speak about the cultural heritage of Bengal.
Sadar Pranam to everyone. What a fascinating session we had prior to this panel discussion where we covered everything on the conservation and preservation of cultural heritage, starting from manuscripts to built heritage to numismatics to epigraphy and to art conservation. And of course, the cultural corridors, I would say. Before attending this session earlier this week, I was invited by the Ministry of Culture to speak on the Shaivite corridors of Jammu and Kashmir, and the same corridor which was primarily used by the Hindu Shahis and Mahmud of Ghaznavi to invade Kashmir. So, and then we discussed, and there also I discussed the cultural heritage or the corridor, paths that Sri Anil Dhirji has covered. Now, when we talk of cultural heritage, I don't want to add on to what Bikramjit Babu or Anil Ji or Mr. G.M. Kapoor has covered. They have kind of covered everything end to end. But picking clue from what Amitabh Babu has shared on the wrestling part of it. So, I'll start from Odisha to make you relate to what I'm trying to say. Ancient India had a culture of, particularly after the Islamic invasions started, they had started building a culture of wrestling, of, building the elite bodyguards who were trained not only in wrestling, but also in martial arts. And these akhadas, what Amitabh Babu has rightly inculcated, they used to reside within the perimeter, 100 meters perimeter or 1 kilometer, 2 kilometer perimeter of each of the key temples. Because whenever an Islamic invasion was happening, the temples bore the brunt of it because they were very clear in their concepts to bring down the deity, kill the Brahmins, destroy the manuscript. If you want to break a civilization, if you want to cut the umbilical cord, you destroy those 4 points and you kill a civilization. And it was very imperative for our monarchies. They understood where they're coming from to protect that. So this Akhada culture plays a very important role, not only in Bengal, but also in Odisha or Vijayanagar or even in northern India. And I'm so thankful, you touched upon the military doctrine or what the Hindus had, and it's also a big cultural heritage. Now, taking clue again from there, when we talk of the wrestling, let's look at the from a Bengal's parlance. All of us have heard about the Lathials, right? Lathials of Bengal. And these Lathials, each of these Lathials were very good wrestlers as well. They could, kill with open hands. And these Lathials, typically they are associated with the zamindari culture. But let me tell you, there is a other side of the story. The story is, how many of you have heard about the Bagdis? Anyone? Just one or two. Okay. I'm so happy, Lieutenant Colonel Sinha, as a part of Royal Asiatic Society, you won't believe it. And I was surprised a couple of months back when I was in their library, I came across one of their monthly journals where they have spoke of Babu Vishwanath or Vishwanath Sardar. And nobody knows today. It is complete erosion of human history and our memories, cultural genocide, you can say, that Babu Vishwanath, who was the first martyr of Indigo Revolution, Nil Bidroho, Prothom martyr, everybody has forgotten about him. And Babu Vishwanath, Manohar Dakat, this Dakat culture, they came from the Bagdi community and they were excellent Lathials and wrestlers. Excellent Lathials and wrestlers, and they were products of these kind of akharas. And it's just not about protecting the temples, but because these people, as a legacy or as a genealogy of history of protecting and preserving in our culture, they rose against the Britishers also, against the European masters, against the planters, colonial planters. And this is something which we do not look at when we consider or discuss about the akharas. It's just one aspect of it, we look at it. The other aspect I covered is the temple protection that they spoke of. The third thing that I want to take clue from what our dearest Professor Prabal Babu has covered on Navadweep. Now, Navadweep is something which came up as an offshoot of Mithila. Now, we know about the Mithila culture, the Maithili paintings, the Mithila Pandits, but what we don't speak of is, and it has to be propagated more and more, is the emergence of Navadweep as a cultural center. ন্যায় শাস্ত্র আমাদের মহাপ্রভু ন্যায় শাস্ত্রে পণ্ডিত ছিলেন, কিন্তু we have forgotten that legacy and we are not discussing that. And as Anil Babu discussed on the corridor, where did this corridor start from? This corridor started from Navadweep, and there was a corridor which was connecting Navadweep to Mithila also. And that is where the culture of corridor or the discussion of corridor is very important, because these corridors, not only just for Bengal but for pan India, is a harbinger of culture from every aspect: temples, invasions, religious, education, everything. And when I say so, Bengal should take a pride in the fact that the Uttarapath, which finds its mention in the Manusmriti by Swambhu Manu, used to start from Takshashila and end in Tamralipta. And obviously, when we are looking at Tamralipta, where it is ending, we are looking at trading centers as well, where the Gangaridi, which is mentioned by the Greeks, Chandraketugar, our very own Chandraketugar, or Panduraja Dhibi, these were areas which were bustling trade centers, okay? And a lot needs to be done on that. And I'm sorry, but due to lack of funds, the Ministry of Culture, that focus has still not happened. And the other way of looking at it is the flourishing maritime trade of Bengal, which we don't speak of. So I wanted to make it a point today to call out through our friends in media and to all the educationals who are over here, that IHAR wants to start a project on documenting the maritime history of Bengal. We have enough documentation in place, enough research in place on the Kalingan maritime trade. Dhirji himself has done a lot of missions on finding surface finds on the British era or the European era, particularly from the period of Shah Jahan, and unearthing those ships. But for Bengal, we discuss a lot about Bengal, and we have not done anything. And let me tell you, as per Huensang and Ptolemy, or the Periplus of Ethiopian Sea, Tamralipta and Chilika, Huensang spells it as Cheli Talao or Cheli Patao, whatever you want to mention. These were the two natural harbors. And when I say natural harbors, it means they were calling the mother vessels. So mother vessels are the ones which carry the huge number of container, and they are feeded by the feeder vessels, which carry and feed those mother vessels. So we have to remember, when I say it's a natural harbor, it also is a point of shipbuilding. So Chilika and Tamralipta is where the places where the ancient shipbuilding technology was thriving. The stitch ship, Mr. Sanjeev Sanyal is running a project and building a stitch ship, but it is not technically called a stitch ship. It is called a swing ship because a swing technology was used, okay? If you go to the National Institute of Oceanography in Goa, they will give you the technology what was used, which was like a crisscross and a zigzag way of stitching up the ships. And no nails were used, because technically the idea of swing ships came in because nails, if you put the nails on the ships, on the hull, you have those magnetic rocks on the sea which will pull down the ships. Especially the bigger vessels had a lot of problem. And why I take so much of pride, and you all should take so much of pride in the maritime trade of Bengal, because we were building ships which were carrying 700 to 2,000 men, along with elephants, ivory, minerals, crops, and diamonds and whatnot, and salt and masalas, all types of masalas. So I think time has come that IHAR consciously is trying to revive that glory and is touching upon those points which are not so much discussed in public domain. And I have personally requested Prawal Babu also to work on Navadweep in a bigger way, and we are willing to support him also in every possible way. Amitabh Babu, if you can build on the Akhada culture of Bengal, that would be fantastic. I think you have a lot of inputs available with you, and again, I'm calling for people, academicians, professors, scholars who wants to work with us for building and documenting the maritime history and heritage of Bengal. Thank you.
What Shujoda was just mentioning, very close to where we are sitting, we have Bolagor, Shobuj Deep. So Bolagor was the place from where even the Europeans were buying their vessels as late as the time of Aurangzeb. Okay, so we should be proud of that. Even if you go to Bolagor today, you will see small boats scattered here and there as you take the village road by the Hooghly, Ganga River, Bhagirathi River. So Balagar is the place, but no remnants of the zamindar houses are there. That's it.
And just to add on to him, I was referring to the inland waterways. Murshidabad, previously known as Maqsoodabad, named as Murshidabad by Murshid Quli Khan, was calling mother vessels because of the depth and the width of Bhagirathi over there. It was the Singapore of India at that point of time as a trading center. Palatial houses, richest of the rich staying in Murshidabad. And these days, Chhawa is making a lot of noise, the movie on Chhatrapati Sambhaji Maharaj. But taking a note from that with respect to Bengal, let me tell you that Murshidabad was so flourishing at that point of time that Aurangzeb's entire Deccan campaign of 27 years was almost funded by the the funds being remitted by Murshid Quli Khan. 1 crore a month in those days, 1 crore. And it continued even after the death of Alamgir. It continued, and Murshid Quli Khan was a great supporter of Emperor Farrukhsiyar. So when Farrukhsiyar was fighting his internal battles to gain the throne, his internal push was funded by Murshid Quli Khan again, or Murshidabad for that matter. So that was, and it was prime contributor to that revenue was inland waterways, was the maritime trade. That's what I'm saying. Thank you.
While speaking, the first thing you said, Shurjo sir, I'm talking so about the Shaivite corridors of Kashmir. So one thing that most of the people don't know even now, with the POK that is there occupied by Pakistan, which obviously includes Gilgit and Baltistan,
Yes.
some portion of it was not annexed in 1947. Okay, some few, means it's a small stretch of land in the Cham Valley, like it was annexed in 1965, and also during the about 450 square kilometers during the 1971 war. Okay, and we lost that on the diplomatic table. So all the Hindus and Sikhs from those areas migrated to the India controlled areas. So has ever the Indian government thought of preserving or rather that the Pakistan state conserves those places of worship?
See, I'll be very honest with you. The question is no. And why no? You'll have to understand that because you heard Bikramjit Babu, right? He is from ICOMOS. I am also a part of ICOMOS. Both of us are desk reviewers for United World Heritage Sites, but obviously can't, express which sites we cover. But then, from that perspective, ICOMOS stands for International Council of Monuments and Sites. It is spread over 135 countries. And every country is aligned to the ICOMOS country branches are aligned to the political establishment of that country. So India government in even its best of motives, it cannot technically step into that area. And per data, pictures, reports, field reports that are available, those temples, even before partition, were already run over by Qasim or Ghazni or Ghori in their, in their bid to enter India when they were entering India, because that was the stretch where they used to come. But even before that, what is important for you to know is I refer to the Hindu Shahis. Now, the Hindu Shahis as a dynasty is not talked about in the national mainstream media. And Anand Pal, Jai Pal, Trilochan Pal, or Bhim Pal, these were the people who resisted not only Ghazni but Ghazni's forefathers also, Alaptijin, Sadruddin. And these are all documented history which I am sharing you from uh, Ghazni's own chronicler or historian, Utbi, Al Utbi. He has written a book called Kitabul Hind, which gives you a detailed account of 1,000 years of history, 1,000 years back, how India was. And in that book, if you read, it gives you the destruction that he had unleashed on the various temples. And the area that you touched upon, the Gilgit Baltistan, it has the Kafir Kot temples. And these Kafir Kot temples are nothing but were, built by the Hindu Shahis, right?
I don't,
Yeah.
I don't want to make it too academic, but you can read Andre Wing's Al Hind and the Making of the Islamic World. Okay, that will give you enough and more ammunition.
The point is related to the maritime heritage of Bengal, what you say. So we know that there are foreign companies or institutions who are working on the extraction or taking out of shipwrecks from oceans and seas abroad. So I think historically there might be more shipwrecks at the Indian coast, starting from Bengal up to Gujarat. I asked this question because at the ICCR, somehow I uh, heard about it from Sir Anil Dheer, who have been talking about it. Sir, has the government taken any such initiative or any such private companies have come forward to extract those things? Because the treasures which is inside are more valuable than what we have on the surface in today's date.
Yeah. So, little bit of data. As per the archival data available with the Indian Meteorological Department, between 1892 to 1900, along the entire eastern coast, which when I say eastern coast, it means from the mouth of Ganges to the mouth of Godavari, 600 kilometers of coastline. There are close to 300 plus ships which were drowned because of cyclone and tornado. And because of these climatic disturbances, many of the maritime ports, particularly in Odisha, were washed away by flood. So these shipwrecks are till date available. Mr. Dheer personally has worked on many of them I know. And the government is always free to engage the private operators in bringing down this, taking up these wrecks, but it is a government of India call. It's a Ministry of Culture who has to take a decision on that. And I'm sure if I see earlier this week, from today's what, 23rd. So from 18th of February, the government of India, I mean, all of you would be very happy. They have, after a gap of almost 2 decades, they have started the underwater excavation of Dwarka. And this has happened because of Mr. Modi's interference. And I know the team, I know the academicians, the people who had rallied with the Ministry of Culture with Mr. Shekhawat, Cabinet Minister Mr. Shekhawat, and submitted the files with the analog and digital pictures of Dwarka, which gives you a brief of the underwater, in the Gulf of Kutch, Khambat, and of course in Bhet Dwarka. So if Dwarka has happened, it has taken a bit of time. But if Dwarka has happened, I'm sure these wreckages would also be, sought after in some next 3, 4, or 5 years, because it requires a lot of money, equipments, and a lot of other environmental, I would say, factors which needs to be considered to ensure that the flora and fauna of that place is not disturbed. Now, having said that, let me tell you, for the last 3 or 4 years, I personally have also, wherever in all those forums that I have spoken, I have been speaking about Dwarka. Mr. Dheer has been with me in couple of those sessions. So, but finally, it is glad. I mean, we are all glad that it has started. And the person who is driving this project, Dr. Alok Tripathi, he's the father of underwater archaeology in ASI. So you'll have to understand two things. One is underwater archaeology, and then there is the maritime archaeology or maritime, marine archaeology. So kind of similar with little difference. So he is the father of underwater archaeology in ASI. So he is himself heading the project, and I was talking to him a couple of days back. So I am personally very hopeful that in the next 3, 4, or 5 years, this shipwrecks would be discovered, and one of those shipwrecks, I'm sure, would be the containing the coaches which were to ply between Howrah and Hooghly, which I learned from my father a couple of days back. Could those wreckages, I mean, this yield could give you those wreckages also. Thank you.
Yes, like Suryaji said, we source Admiralty maps of Britain and the period which he says even earlier. On the Admiralty maps, there are already marked shipwrecks, 160 are marked. The latitude, longitude is also given. Maybe it's approximate. Some of the shipwrecks in the Odisha coast are just few 100 meters from the shore, and they are so close that the fishermen don't throw their nets because it gets entangled. So I am telling you, like what he said, the government of India, very, very frankly and honestly, the government of India will do the excavation, they will do the underwater archaeology in this thing, but these foreign companies, including the one which did the Titanic, they work on a 50-50. Jack Costu did it. The government gives them the wreck. Whatever comes up, 50% is there, then 50% comes to the government. This has happened in Greece, in France, and everywhere. And mind you, all the shipwrecks which are off the coast of at least the Bay of Bengal, they have bullion in them, have gold and silver. Because they came for trading. Either they sold and they were taking the thing back, You can imagine the sheer archaeological thing. We really wish they do one or two. And they are not difficult. If they can't do it, let them employ foreign agencies. As a model, if they do one or two, and we always harp on marine trade. Remember, marine trade was not possible without a marine navy.
Yes.
The Odisha Sadhavos, the Odisha maritime trade came to an end because they didn't have, the Angres had a navy, the Cholas had a navy, the Chettias had a navy. There was a lot of piracy on the sea. So you could never have had a healthy trade if you didn't have a healthy navy. The Angres had it, they built even seaside ports. So one of the reasons why the Odisha maritime trade is more of a myth and legend is that there is no evidence of a navy, while as there is evidence of piracy.
It's the same for Bengal.
Same for Bengal also.
Same for Bengal.
So we really wish some 182 are identified. Last where the ship went down. So maybe that time the latitude we didn't have GPS, but half a kilometer mein to hoga, and not very deep. Because what happened? It was a very cyclonic coast. Whenever there was a storm, there was no early warning. They used to rush towards the, coast or something and they used to sink. And the ships that have sunk in port in Potagad, Gopalpur, which have sunk in Pipili, Balesur, they sunk in port, we know. In one day, 6 ships sank. Even in the port, we are not excavating it. They have been silted, and if it is silted, it is like a time capsule. If you open up. If you should really do, instead of just saying, big, this thing, we had a maritime trade and all that. There are so many, and it's so sad that we haven't till today even done a single shipwreck. Not even a single. You don't know the amount of gold or silver that will be there.
Yes, it is all there. And just to add on to what Anilji said is he mentioned about piracy. So both for Bengal, and why I say so, because both for Bengal and Kaling, piracy was the top 3 reason, one of the top 3 reasons which killed the maritime trade, because we lacked a navy at the later part of, particularly in the European period, we lacked a navy. And what happened was these pirates, were penetrating deep inside Bengal using the inland waterways. I mean, they went up to Murshidabad also. The Arakanese, the Portuguese. And who are the Arakanese? They are the forefathers of the Rohingyas that we see today. Ruthless people. They were so ruthless, they were so ruthless, even the Portuguese pirates used to be fearful of them. These Arakanese. And these Arakanese were fighting for none other than Pratapaditya against the Mughals, against Mansingh or Islam Khan. So it is really apologetic, when we say and when we iconize Pratapaditya. He should not be iconized. If somebody should be iconized, it is the Malla Rajas who built the Bishnupur temples. It is the Malla Rajas who ran and protected the eldest son of Maharaja Mansingh when Mansingh was fighting the Pathans. Jagat Singh, the eldest son of Mansingh, you have the Jagat Shiromani temple. He died of cholera at a very early age, but he was a fantastic warrior. The Odisha campaign of Mansingh was led by Jagat Singh, and Jagat Singh ran into a very sticky wicket with the Pathans, and it was the Malla Rajas who came running. Bir Hambir. How many of you know it? Bir Hambir came running from Bishnupur to save Jagat Singh. And we don't iconize Hambir. We iconize Pratapaditya, who did not spare his own uncle. What kind of cultural heritage are we propagating?